As designers and creators, we are bombarded with online tutorials telling you can learn something in 1 week or even 1 minute, but you don't learn from watching design tutorials. As a self-taught creative in the design industry for over a decade now, I've watched a lot of tutorials. And although I've learned a lot from tutorials, I could have learned a lot more, a hell of a lot faster with a few easy steps. So in this video, I'm going to reveal why you're not learning as much as you could from tutorials, the 3 steps you can take to learn more from them, and a key phrase that links these 3 steps together. But first, I want to talk about the wonderful sport of darts to explain some science behind my ideas. Believe it or not, you can actually trick your brain into thinking you've learned a skill. And in psychology, this is called the illusion of competence. A study by Carlos and O'Brien found that people who had watched a demo video 20 times on how to throw darts thought they'd be better at throwing darts themselves than a group who'd watched the demo video once. It turns out this wasn't the case. When it came down to actually throwing the things, the 2 groups scored the same whether they'd watched the demo video 20 times or 1 time. And they tried this with juggling, moonwalking, and computer games. Same result every time. So how does this apply to design tutorials? Well, it's super easy to sit at your desk, finish a video on Photoshop blending mode, look in the mirror and say, "Take the day off, Jack. You're an expert now." But Jack isn't an expert. He is suffering from the illusion of competence, and he needs to realize that watching isn't enough. He needs to embed this new knowledge so it doesn't escape days after. Which brings me on to my first tip. Use a second brain. Using a second brain can revolutionize the way you learn from design tutorials and the way you learn in general. A second brain is a digital store for your knowledge. You can store your bookmark tutorials there, but you can also store your analysis and summaries on them. And it's a store which is easily accessible, easily searchable, and it's always evolving. Integrating a tutorial into your second brain system is super easy. When I watch a tutorial, I immediately embed it on my digital note-taking app of choice, Notion, and I take notes all the way through with time codes for my favorite parts. The idea is to do this super roughly at first, because when you come back to the page on Notion, when you need the tutorial again, you can highlight certain passages, you can refine and summarize. Each time you go through this refinement process, you embed the knowledge a little bit further. And it gets past the problem of having to find the video again and also having to scroll through the video to try and find a particular part. So why do you learn more from tutorials this way? By turning the tutorial into your own words, you are taking advantage of a psychological phenomenon called the generation effect. The studies have shown that information is better retained if you generate it in your own words rather than simply watching it or reading it. So whenever you can, try to turn learning materials into your own words to take advantage of the generation effect. Tip number 2. Engage with creators. Now, I watch the tutorials of Ross Mason quite a lot, who's the master of making products look beautiful in 3D. Here's some of his work. Enjoy for a second. After watching his YouTube content for a while, I did a bit of research. I found out that he has a Patreon channel with loads of extra content, which then allowed access to a Discord channel, and roughly a year later, it's one of the best things I ever did, because now I can ask Ross questions directly, and I've connected with loads of other like-minded designers. If you love a tutorial or a course, find out if that creator has a wider ecosystem that they've created. Which brings me on to my final tip to learn more from tutorials, and it's my personal favorite. Remember to play. At school, playtime was the best time. After a few hours of lessons, you couldn't wait to get out on the playground and, as a millennial, play Beyblades, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, or Top Trumps. But now, as adults, I think it's harder to just set aside a time to play, to experiment. During school, we didn't think of playtime as a time for learning, but actually that's when our brains really flourish. Studies show that active problem solving and experimentation leads to better information retention. By experimenting, you develop new neural pathways and new connections to material. Taking your tutorial and experimenting with the content is important for two reasons. Firstly, you develop your own style. This is a big one because I think a lot of design stuff out there nowadays is quite similar. And this is because we have a huge amount of online learning materials and there's a lot of stuff to copy from. People are watching and copying, but not watching and playing, which is what we really should be doing. And secondly, experimentation is a form of active engagement in the learning material. This is the phrase that I mentioned at the start, which links these 3 points together, and is what I want you to take away from this video. Active engagement is connecting with learning material through application, repetition, and feedback. And so when you're next watching a tutorial, remember to actively engage with the content in one of these ways. Oh, hey there guys. If you're still here, I am going to stick a video up here about the best book I've ever read as a creative. And if you don't fancy that, I've got my trusty notepad here and I have some bonus facts for you about the video that you can take away and reel off at the next party you go to. Hit the music. Number 1. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve states that without reinforcement, information is quickly forgotten. Roughly 56% of information is lost in 1 hour, 66% after a day, and 75% after 6 days. Number 2. According to the New York Times, we consume the equivalent of 174 full newspapers worth of content each and every day. Number 3. Learning that is spread out over time increases knowledge retention. So I hope you enjoyed those guys, and if you still want to watch that video above, it's about the best book that I've ever read as a creative. Until next time, bye!